We work with leaders a lot on the operational cadence, the operating rhythm of their organization. And that's just a simple way of saying, are you moving your organization forward in time as fast as the environment around you is adjusting, changing, etc. And for most organizations that have a more traditional mindset, where they were used to competing with like-structured threats or competitors, the answer is they don't move quite as fast as the environment around them changes. And in the world where I grew up, inside the special operations community, I can say we learned this the hard way, right? Because we had a system that was built around this traditional organizational model. And in a model like that, you have, oversimplifying it here, but three main parts of the organization. You have your strategic leaders at the top, you have your operational teams in the middle that keep all the trains running, et cetera, and then you have your tactical frontline folks out there on the battlefield. And you can apply that over to any big organization. That type of thinking isn't new. The language tends to vary, but it's the same sort of core idea between senior leadership, mid-management, and frontline folks. And all of those are moving forward in time. And that's sort of your role as a senior leader, amongst many other things, is to keep us all moving generally in the same direction. Now, that rhythm of the organization, it varies by layers. And we've all experienced this depending on how far you are into your own career. Strategic leaders are supposed to be thinking in quarterly, annual, multi-year cycles. Your operational folks are thinking week to week, quarter to quarter, making sure that resources align with objectives, et cetera. And your tactical teams, your frontline folks, move at a more staccato pace. They're very, very busy, and then they're waiting for the next opportunity, et cetera. And so they tend to be a little more varied in their cadence. A traditional organizational communication cycle, that traditional operating rhythm that you'd find in a system that looks like this, is really well designed to take information here, pass it to teams here, get it to frontline teams here, and they can go execute whatever it is they're told to do. And so you make a decision, you push it through the mid-management, it gets to the front line, they do a thing, they learn new information, and they push that information back up. Another decision is made, and that comes back down, et cetera. So you live on this nice up and down cadence over time. If your competitors, the environment around you, they're all working through a similar model, so it's this versus this, then the question is, who does this with more efficiency? Who communicates, passes information, drives action on the ground faster and with more clarity? Right? That's a traditional way of playing the game. What we found in the special operations world, and then certainly what we see happening in industry today, is that there's also a different type of threat. This traditional way of running an organization hasn't gone to the wayside. It's still very important for some things, but it's not going to solve all your problems. And that's because all of us are now surrounded by these other threats, these sort of networked problems. That can be networked competitors. That can be networks of consumers that talk constantly about your latest and greatest products. It can be any number of different types of threats that operate differently. We think that an organization now needs to live in both of these rhythms at the same time. They need to have this traditional top-down, bottom-up model so that they can plan and execute against more linear processes. Perhaps the way you manage your human capital and onboarding, or parts of your supply chain. These are very important, stable, and structured parts of any big, mature organization. But there are also these other faster changing and quick emerging threats out there. And to deal with those, we believe secondary communication paths need to be established as well. In the special operations community, we started to adopt a second pathway, what we call the operations and intelligence update, to put it in military vernacular. And that didn't do away with this red line communication structure here, but it said we also need in parallel a communication structure that allows senior leadership, mid-management, and frontline folks to all synchronize at the same time on some sort of cadence that allows us to understand what's going on out in this environment. And so in that world, we started to live on this 24-hour cycle. Every 24 hours, 7 days a week for years on end, that group would get together globally. You would have thousands of people spending an hour to an hour and a half on one remote digital communication platform, video conferencing with one another all around the world. And that was the opportunity for these frontline tactical teams to be able to talk directly with senior leadership all the way up into the organization and explain to them what they were seeing on the ground. And that was a very different sort of communication pathway. And it's when those two live in tandem, any big organization that we spend time with, we encourage them to really understand and analyze what's happening on these traditional lines and where is that succeeding. And then what are those problems that can't be solved in that more linear, structured fashion? And how do we build out a secondary communication pathway that can happen at the right cadence to solve for these more rapidly changing networked problems where ultimately you need to decentralize authorities down to the tactical team so that they can execute with independence. It's the balance between these two where we think the hybrid organization of the 21st century, one that is both structured where it needs to be, living in a traditional sort of top-down model, and unstructured, operating as a network when that is the solution that they need, that's really going to succeed in the years ahead of us.